Chapter 93. Han Hao looked at me and said, "Shaoli, can you trust me one more time?" "It's not a matter of trust. Han Hao, I understand your feelings for me, but I can't accept it." "Sorry. Are you worried about Xinyao?" I shook my head and looked at him. "Well, no matter who it is or what it is, I won't accept you." Seeing my firm attitude, Han Hao sighed. He let go of me and looked at me. "Okay, I respect your choice. I'll wait until you're divorced, then I'll pursue you. This is my business. You don't have to worry about it. Don't you want Duanmu K and me to be happy?" I suddenly felt that Han Hao was very persistent. "No, I just want you to be happy. I also want you to give me a chance to be happy." I didn't want to think about anything else. I felt that we shouldn't talk about this topic anymore. I suddenly remembered that Xinyao was still looking for him, so I said, "Let's talk about it later. You go and accompany Xinyao. Have to go back." Han Hao reached out and held me in his arms. He whispered to me, "Okay, whatever you say. I'll go find her. You take good care of yourself. If there's anything, you must call me." I leaned into Han Hao's arms and nodded. Han Hao cupped my face and kissed my forehead. Then he left. I didn't know why, but this intimate action made me subconsciously accept him. Maybe my feelings for Han Hao had never disappeared. I stood by the rose pond for a while, looking at the garden full of blooming flowers. All sorts of feelings welled up in my heart. I didn't want to face it, but I still had to face it. I walked to the living room. I didn't know what unexpected things would happen when I saw Duanmu K in my room. I passed through the living room and headed upstairs. Xiao Fengya's bedroom door was closed. It seemed like she was still resting. This was good. If I really had an argument with Duanmu K, I wouldn't have to worry about it affecting her mood. I walked to the bedroom door. The entire corridor was silent. There was no one in sight. The usually lively home had become lifeless. I pushed the door open and walked into the bedroom. As soon as I entered the room, I saw Duanmu K lying naked with his eyes closed. I didn't say anything and gently closed the door. I didn't want to wake him up. I walked to the wardrobe by the bed and gently opened it, then took out my clothes one by one, because I knew with Duanmu K's personality, he definitely wouldn't allow me to sleep on the same bed as him in this room. I took a few coats and was about to turn around and put them on the chair next to the bed when I suddenly saw Duanmu K sitting by the bed, looking at me with a serious face. I didn't have time to react. I was scared and took 2 steps back, bumping into the wardrobe. My legs went soft and I sat on the floor. I lifted my head to look at Duanmu Quebec. He was still sitting on the bed, glaring at me. If it had been in the past, Duanmu K would have rushed to me and hugged me. But now his attitude towards me was clear. I wasn't that important anymore. I sneered and stood up with the help of the wardrobe. I glanced at him and turned around to take out my clothes. After a while I was almost done with all the clothes. I started to take out my luggage and put the clothes inside one by one. Duanmu K just sat in front of me and looked at me without moving. There were a few times when I glanced at him, but his gaze was very determined. He didn't look away from me at all. I didn't feel uncomfortable either. I only lowered my head and tidied up the clothes. When I was halfway through, Duanmu K suddenly grabbed my hand. I lifted my head and looked at him with a puzzled face. He snatched the clothes from my hand and tore them without saying anything. My temper flared up. I shouted at Duanmu K, "What are you doing?" He didn't pay attention to me. He reached for the second piece of clothing and tore it. I didn't know what he wanted to do. I looked at him angrily. "Stop. Don't touch my clothes." Duanmu K glared at me. He grabbed another piece of clothing and tore it in front of me. I didn't know what he wanted to do. Seeing that he was about to tear my clothes again, I hurriedly grabbed his hand and tried to stop him. However, Duanmu K was too strong. He flung my arm away and threw me onto the bed. He turned around and grabbed the clothes in the suitcase, tearing them one by one. I tried to press his arm down again, but he swung me away. He suddenly reached for the gown that he'd bought for me. My heart skipped a beat and I jumped off the bed. Before he could grab the gown, I grabbed it and hugged it in my arms. I leaned against the wardrobe and looked at him in horror. Dwanmu-K stood up from the bed. He looked at me with a fierce gaze. I retreated step by step until I reached the door. There was nowhere else to go. I hugged the dress tightly and looked at him. Not this one. You can't tear it. Dwanmu-K extended his hand in front of me. He said calmly, "Give it to me." I shook my head. My tears were about to fall. I looked at him and said, "Not this one. For the last time, give it to me." Dwanmu-K looked at me and said slowly. I suddenly felt fear. I hid the gown behind me and shook my head desperately at Dwanmu-Quebec. This was the gown that he had given me. It was the thing that I treasured the most. I couldn't watch it get destroyed. Dwanmu-K walked in front of me. He grabbed my collar with both hands. Although I was very scared, I tried my best to protect the dress. Dwanmu-K grabbed the two corners of my collar and pulled with all his strength. My top was torn by him. I was only left with my underwear. I couldn't help but cry. I looked at Dwanmu-K and said, "No. Are you giving it to me or not?" He threw the torn dress to the side and looked at me as he said, "Dwanmu-K, I'm begging you, okay? Me go. This is the most precious thing I have. I'm begging you." It was the first time I had begged someone so humbly. I didn't know why. Looking at the cruel Dwanmu-K in front of me, he didn't just tear my dress, he tore my heart. Dwanmu-K didn't stop. He reached out and tore my dress. Besides my underwear, there was nothing covering my body. Dwanmu-K was too strong. When he tore the dress, he made a few red spots on my body. I squatted on the ground and leaned against the corner of the wall. The gown was stuck in the crevice. To me, this humiliation was worse than death. Dwanmu-K squatted down. He lifted my chin and looked at me. "This is what you get for not listening to me. Don't challenge my bottom line. Give me that dress." Chapter 94. I looked at Dwanmu-K in fear. I was afraid that he would tear off my remaining clothes again. He was squatting in front of me. I didn't know what to do. Just then Dwanmu-K's phone rang. The moment he turned his head, it was a rare opportunity. I suddenly stood up and reached out to open the door and run out. But reality often deviated from the plan. Just as my hand touched the doorknob, Dwanmu-K suddenly pressed the door shut. He pressed me against the door. I was so scared that I quickly hugged the dress in my arms. I didn't dare to look back at him. Dwanmu-K put his head next to my ear. He said, "What? You want to run? Where do you think you can run to?" I closed my eyes and said loudly, "Let me out." My voice was trembling. I knew that I was timid, and I was trying my best to pretend that I had a backbone. Dwanmu-K had one hand on the door. His other hand didn't reach forward to grab the dress. His hand reached for my neck. I thought to myself, does he want to strangle me to death? But he didn't do that. His hand slid across my neck and wandered to my back. Finally, his hand stopped at the clasp of my bra. My body trembled. Just then, I heard Dwanmu-K's cold laughter. He said to me, "What's wrong?" "Scared. But it's too late." He pulled hard and the clasp came open. I clutched my chest tightly and squatted down. I was on the verge of breaking down. I didn't know what to do. Dwanmu-K's phone was still ringing. He didn't pick it up. I could feel him standing behind me. I was squatting in front of him. I couldn't resist at all. I didn't answer. I let the tears flow down my face and onto the floor. They fell onto the dress. Because of my struggle, the dress was already ruined. Dwanmu-K stood behind me and casually picked up my clothes from the suitcase. He tore them off one by one and said to me calmly, "Give it to me. It doesn't belong to you." I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my heart. I stood up and turned to look at Dwanmu-Quebec. He was standing right in front of me, very close to me. He might not have had time to react to my actions. He looked at me with a puzzled expression. I clutched my chest with one hand and hugged the dress with the other. I looked at him and said, "When are you going to stop being crazy? Do you want to ruin this dress that badly? Fine. I'll fulfill your wish." I hugged the dress and walked to the window. I opened the window and threw the dress out of the window. The moment I saw the dress fall, my heart broke into pieces. I clutched my chest with both hands and sat on the ground by the window. Even if my tears fell, I couldn't make a sound. I looked out of the window and looked at the beautiful garden. I also felt that the world was gray. Duanmuke walked over to me. He stood beside me and looked at me. He said, "Have you finally exploded? Even if you can't bear it, you have to bear it. In my eyes, you're not even a toy that I can vent on. Do you understand, Miss Ling?" I turned my head and looked at Duanmuke's calm expression. I sneered and ignored him. I stood up and walked to the wardrobe. I rummaged through the messy suitcase, looking for clothes that could still be worn. However, most of them had been torn apart by Duanmu Quebec. I flipped through them randomly. At this moment, Duanmuke suddenly appeared beside me. He grabbed my arm and threw me onto the bed. Before I could react, his whole body was on top of me. I was so scared that I quickly covered my chest and shouted at him, "What are you doing?" Duanmuke forcefully grabbed my arms and pressed me onto the bed. My upper body was completely naked in front of him. My legs kicked wildly. Duanmuke pressed down on my arms and looked at me. "Don't move. What do you want? If you hate me, I'll leave. Can't I? Why do you have to torture me?" Gradually, I lost the strength to struggle and let him press on top of me. Games need to have a certain amount of fun. Look at you now. You look like a defeated pet. I don't know why, but I suddenly feel very excited. Duanmuke lowered his head and gently bit my collarbone. I cried out. He lifted his head and kissed me on the lips. The sudden kiss made me feel very uncomfortable. It wasn't a kiss of love. Felt like he was sucking my blood. My whole body felt uncomfortable. I couldn't resist and let Duanmuke kiss me. He used one hand to grab both of my arms and the other hand to touch my body without restraint. I wriggled my body, resisting with all my might. I didn't know how many tears flowed from the corners of my eyes, but the hair on my temples was already wet. Seeing that I was resisting so fiercely, Duanmuke raised his head and stared at me. "Resisting is useless. I advise you to be obedient. Don't make any useless resistance." "Why? You don't have any feelings for me. Why did you touch me?" I didn't care about anything else and questioned Duanmu Quebec why. "That's the dress I bought for you. You threw away my things. What else do you have to compensate me with? I took your body. That's too cheap for you." Duanmuke looked at me, his hand slowly reaching between my legs. I resisted with all my might. Although I was afraid, I still said to Duanmuke, "You were the one who wanted to tear it away. I just wanted to protect it. That's my thing. It's my memory. What right do you have to be so overbearing?" Duanmuke's face revealed an evil smile. He looked at me and said, "It's too late. It's too late to return it to me. Right now, I'm more interested in your body." He reached out and took off all my defenses. "Let go of me, Duanmuke!" I screamed hoarsely. Duanmuke grabbed my face and looked at me. "I'm telling you, you and I aren't divorced yet. You're still my legal wife. I can do whatever I want to you. No one can stop me." I lay naked on the bed, hugging the quilt as my tears flowed uncontrollably. I didn't know how many times I had cried. My eyes were red and swollen, and my body was covered in bruises. They were all traces of Duanmuke's scratches. It really looked like I had just been violated. My hair was disheveled, and other than the pain, I couldn't feel what had just happened. Chapter 95. I rested on the bed for a while. It was already evening, so I slowly climbed out of bed. Looking at the clothes on the floor that had been torn by Duanmuke, I couldn't find anything to cover my body. I also looked through the wardrobe. There were only thick clothes left, but they weren't suitable for me to wear right now. With no other choice, I could only find a random shirt that belonged to Dwanmuke and put it on. Luckily, his shirt size was bigger than mine, so it could cover the places that needed to be covered. After putting on the clothes, I was too embarrassed to ask the housekeeper to come up and clean up the room. I could only pack up all the torn clothes and put them at the door, waiting for the housekeeper to come and take them away. I walked downstairs and saw Xiao Fengya sitting on the sofa in the living room. After resting, her complexion had improved a lot, but she still looked very dispirited. I sighed and walked over to sit next to her. "Ma, how was your rest?" Xiao Fengya looked at me and nodded slightly. "I just woke up and sat down in the living room. I'm fine now. Feel much better. How's Dad?" Xiao Fengya asked me worriedly. I held her hand and said, "Ma, it's okay. Xinyao has already made arrangements. You don't need to worry. Dad should be back tomorrow or the day after." Xiao Fengya held my hand. She suddenly saw the bruise on my neck that had been scratched by Duanmu Quebec. She reached out and gently touched it. With a puzzled expression, she asked me, "Xiaoli, how did you get this?" I turned my head to avoid Xiao Fengya's eyes. I tightly gripped my collar, not daring to let her see. Xiao Fengya suddenly grabbed my hand and pulled up my sleeve. She looked at my wrist and the bruises all over my arm. She looked at me and said, "Xiaoli, what happened? Why are there so many bruises on your body? Could it be?" My tears flowed down again. I wiped them away and said to Xiao Fengya, "Ma, I'm fine. You must be hungry. I'll make something for you to eat." Then I stood up and walked towards the kitchen, but Xiao Fengya grabbed my arm. Because she accidentally touched my wound, I cried out in pain. Xiao Fengya quickly let go and looked at me. "Sorry, I didn't notice." I was afraid that Xiao Fengya would worry, so I turned and smiled at her. "Ma, it's okay. These little bruises are nothing." Xiao Fengya sat down on the sofa. She picked up the phone and dialed a number. She motioned for me to wait for a moment. I sat next to her and quietly accompanied her. After the call went through, I heard Xiao Fengya say, "Xinyao, it's Ma. How's Pa? It's good that he's fine. Thank you for your trouble. I'll go to your closet and get a set of clothes for your sister-in-law. Don't ask me what happened. I'll tell you the details when you get back." Xiao Fengya hung up the phone and pulled me by the hand to Xinyao's bedroom upstairs. I knew that Xiao Fengya really cared about me, but in my heart I refused. I followed behind Xiao Fengya and said, "Ma, there's really no need. I'll just wear this. There's no need to trouble yourself." Xiao Fengya didn't look back. She pulled my hand and said, "How can you just wear a shirt? I already told Xinyao that she has a lot of clothes." Xiao Fengya pulled me into Xinyao's room and closed the door behind her. She opened Xinyao's closet and carefully looked through the clothes that would fit me. She looked at me and asked in a soft voice, "What happened? Why do you have so many wounds on your body? Why are you wearing K's clothes?" I thought for a moment, then told her about Duanmu K's incident. After hearing what had happened, Xiao Fengya suddenly stopped what she was doing. She turned around and hugged me in her arms. She gently stroked my hair and said, "Xiaoli, I'm sorry. Ma didn't protect you well and let you suffer so much." I cried hard, as if something that had been suppressed for a long time had finally been released. I said in a soft voice, "Ma, it's okay. It's not your fault, and it's not his fault." Xiao Fengya cupped my face and looked at me. "Ma just wants to ask you one thing. Can you not hate him? He wasn't like this before. I don't know why he became like this." Xiao Fengya's eyes were also wet, and tears flowed down the corners of her eyes. I reached out and gently wiped the tears from her face. I looked at her and nodded. "Ma, I don't hate him because I love him." Xiao Fengya stroked my hair and said, "Good girl. Let's continue to pick out clothes." Xiao Fengya picked out a few clothes from the wardrobe for me to choose from. I casually chose a simple and convenient dress. When I was changing my clothes, Xiao Fengya saw all the scars on my body. I could feel her eyes were full of pity. I was very willing to be with her. When my mother wasn't by my side, she gave me the warmth of a mother's love, which made me feel not so cold anymore. After changing clothes, I was going to go to the kitchen, but Xiao Fengya insisted that I rest well and pushed me out of the kitchen. Helpless, I could only stare blankly in the living room. I suddenly remembered that when I was fighting over clothes with Duanmu Ke, I had casually thrown the dress he gave me out the window. I didn't know if someone would pick it up. I walked out of the room and walked towards the bedroom window. Just as I turned the corner, I saw Yuexin standing there holding my dress. Oh no, I was still a step too late. I quickly walked in front of Yuexin. She looked at me in shock for a moment, but immediately recovered her usual calmness. I raised my hand and pointed at the dress in her hands. This dress is mine. Please give it back to me. Yuexin glanced at the dress, then looked at me. Oh, I thought you didn't want it anymore. My heart trembled. Could it be that she had overheard our conversation? I calmed down and looked at her. No, please give it back to me. Yuexin didn't intend to give the dress back to me. She held the dress and looked at me. This dress is very important to you. It's the dress that Duanmu Gij gave you, right? Thinking about it, it's funny. On his birthday, he only bought me a dress, but he gave you a custom-made dress. This difference really makes me jealous. What do you want? She was still holding a grudge. It seemed she wouldn't let it go. Yuexin smiled and said, I don't want anything. It originally belonged to me. Now that it's in my hands, do you think I'll give it back to you? I was disgusted by Yuexin's face. I rushed in front of her and reached out to grab the dress and pull it towards me. She was startled and hugged the dress tightly. I looked at her and said, Hurry up and give it back to me. After saying that, I grabbed the dress with my other hand and pulled it towards me. Yuexin didn't let go. She also grabbed the dress tightly. Chapter 96. The two of us held onto the gown tightly, neither of us letting go. Just as the struggle was getting intense, I pulled with all my strength. Yuexin lost her balance and was almost pulled down by me. Suddenly, Duanmu Ke appeared and hugged Yuexin. He reached out and pushed my shoulder, pushing me to the ground. My elbow hit the ground and it was already bruised. I didn't know what to say anymore. I endured the pain and raised my head to look at Duanmu Quebec. He was hugging Yuexin tightly. Yuexin touched her wrist as if she was injured. Her expression became very aggrieved. I was the one who was injured, but why did it seem like she was the one who was wronged? Duanmu Ke looked at Yuexin with concern and asked softly, Exen, how are you? Are you hurt? Yuexin shook her head and said to Duanmu Ke, Duanmu Gij, I'm fine. Luckily you appeared in time and hugged me. Otherwise, I would have fallen to the ground. Duanmu Ke hugged Yuexin. He turned his head to look at me, who was still lying on the ground, and said, Apologize to her. I looked at him with a puzzled expression and said, What did you say? Duanmu Ke raised his voice and said to me one word at a time. I said it. Apologize to her. He pointed at Yuexin. He wanted me to apologize to Yuexin. Was he crazy? She was the one who was in the wrong, not me. Why did he want me to apologize to her? I held my arm and endured the pain as I stood up. Looking at the gown on the ground, I walked forward and picked it up. I patted the dust off the gown and looked at Duanmu Quebec. I didn't do anything wrong. I won't apologize. Duanmu Ke let go of Yuexin and walked in front of me. He looked at me and said, Are you Red Minghui also uncultured? If I hadn't hugged Yuexin, she would have fallen to the ground. Isn't that your fault? Shut up. You can talk about me and scold me, but you can't insult us, Red Minghui. I looked at Duanmu Ke and said firmly. Duanmu Ke suddenly grabbed my collar. His face was getting closer and closer to mine. He looked at me and said, It seems like you haven't suffered enough injuries. Otherwise, you wouldn't be at a loss when talking to me. Let me tell you, in this house, it's your turn to speak loudly to me. He grabbed my wrist with his other hand and gripped it even tighter. I held the gown tightly with my other hand and closed my eyes. Other than pain, I didn't feel anything else. Dwanmuke suddenly let go of me. I opened my eyes and looked at him. He was holding his head and squatting on the ground. Yuexin ran to his side and supported him. Dwanmu Gij, what's wrong? Do you want to see a doctor? Dwanmuke forced himself to stand up. He shook his head and said softly, It's nothing. It's nothing serious. I don't know why, but when I see her, I feel like there's something hidden in my head. My head hurts like it's being pricked by needles. Dwanmu Gij, let's go back and rest. Down. Yuexin supported him. She glanced at me with a blaming gaze, as if it was all my fault. Okay. Yuexin helped Dwanmuke to the living room. Finally they disappeared from my sight. I gently touched my scraped elbow. There was a lot of blood, so it really hurt. But no matter what, I was happy that I got the gown. I hugged the gown and walked back to the living room. Xiao Fengya happened to come out of the kitchen. She looked at me, covered in dust, and my bleeding elbow. She quickly pulled me into her bedroom. Xiao Fengya took out the first aid kit and hurriedly dressed my wound. As Xiao Fengya bandaged my wound, she looked at me and said, K. Is too much. It's all because his father and I have spoiled him. Now he's even more out of control. I hugged the gown and sat on the chair. Beside, I looked at Xiao Fengya and said, Mom, I want to ask you for a favor. What is it? I looked at the gown and then back at Xiao Fengya. Mom, can you keep this gown for me? When I leave Dwanmu's house, I'll take it with me. Xiao Fengya nodded and looked at me. That's not a problem. But Xiaoli, I want to ask you something from your heart. Are you sure you want to divorce Kay? I put the gown on the sofa and pulled Xiao Fengya's hand. Mom, it seems like we can't change this. He doesn't remember me, and he's becoming more and more hostile towards me. I think it's good for him to be with Yuexin. It's better to let go. It's better for everyone. I looked at Xiao Fengya's serious expression. I knew that she was worried about the business deal between our two families. I smiled and said to her, Mom, don't worry. I'll talk to my parents. They won't make things difficult for you and Dad. Don't worry. Silly girl, you can't be thinking that Kay and Yuexin have some kind of relationship, right? Xiao Fengya looked at me with disbelief. I smiled coldly and looked at Xiao Fengya. Mom, I don't know about that. Of course, it's not that important. I just need to do what I need to do in the next 15 days. That's enough. Mom, I'll leave the gown to you. I'll go out first. After I left Xiao Fengya's bedroom, the housekeeper called me to dinner. I told her I wouldn't be eating. I went upstairs to my bedroom. There was no one in the room. I didn't know where Dwanmuke had gone, but it was good that he wasn't here. I had time to tidy up my clothes. After tidying up for a while, I didn't have much left except for the clothes that Dwanmuke had torn. The big suitcase only contained a few pieces of autumn and winter clothing. I carried the suitcase to the bedroom door. When I looked back, I thought of all the moments I had with Dwanmuke here. My heart was sad, but it didn't hurt as much. After being hurt so many times, I didn't feel anything. As soon as I opened the door with the suitcase, I saw Dwanmuke standing at the door, looking at me with a serious face. It was too late to dodge, so I subconsciously hid the suitcase behind me. I looked at him, afraid that he would snatch my only luggage. Dwanmuke looked at me from head to toe, but he didn't say anything. I didn't know what he wanted to do, but I knew that I couldn't look at him for too long. I looked at him, then carried the suitcase and walked past him. He didn't stop me. I couldn't help but sigh in my heart. Fortunately, there wasn't any conflict. Just as I was rejoicing in my misfortune, Dwanmuke suddenly stopped me. Stop! I stopped, but I didn't dare to look back at him. I thought, oh no, he won't do something again, will he? Dwanmuke walked to my side. I could feel his fierce eyes staring at me. Chapter 97. I didn't speak, and I didn't dare to raise my head to look at him. Duanmu-ke reached out and snatched the suitcase from my hand. He picked it up and weighed it. Then he looked at me and said, "What? You still have so much luggage?" I jerked my head up and looked at Duanmu-Quebec. "I don't have any luggage. That's an empty suitcase." Duanmu-ke looked at me and said, "You don't have any luggage?" I reached out and tried to snatch the suitcase from Duanmu-ke's hand, but he hid it behind his back. Then he reached out and pushed my shoulder. I lost my balance and took 2 steps back. I looked at Duanmu-ke angrily. Well, he didn't have me in his heart anymore, so it was natural for him to treat me this way. Duanmu-ke looked at me and sneered. He put my suitcase on the stairs, then looked at me. He lifted his leg and kicked my suitcase down the stairs. I looked at Duanmu-ke and shouted angrily, "Duanmu-ke, what are you doing?" Duanmu-ke rushed in front of me and grabbed my collar. He stared at me and said, "Who gave you the guts to talk to me so loudly?" I shook off Duanmu-ke's hand that was grabbing my collar. I looked at him and said, "Xiao-ke, I've had enough. I don't care if you torture me or wrongly accuse me. If you have something to say, can't you just tell me directly? Do you have to treat me like this?" Duanmu-ke stood there and looked at me. "What I want to do is my business. If you want to accept it, then accept it. If you don't want to accept it, then endure it. This is my principle. Do you understand?" Cold glaze. Duanmu-ke arrogantly raised his head. His eyes seemed to be mocking me. Hearing him say that, my temper got worse. I looked at Duanmu-ke and shouted, "Duanmu-ke, I fell in love with you before. So much so that I could endure everything you did to me today. I could use my love for you to make up for it. But now I've seen through myself. You have completely forgotten about me. In your eyes, I'm worse than a stranger. You don't need to give me another 15 days. I've had enough. I won't endure it anymore from now on. You and I will cut off all ties, and from now on we won't know each other." I glared at Duanmu-ke, walked past him and headed towards the stairs. Duanmu-ke suddenly grabbed my arm and said to me, "I think I told you before that you can't do whatever you want. You are still my Duanmu-ke's woman. Go back to your room." Duanmu-ke pulled my arm and pulled me towards the bedroom. I pulled Duanmu-ke's arm and struggled. I shouted at Duanmu-ke, "Let go of me. You don't have the right to restrict my freedom. Let go of me." The sound of our argument attracted Xiao Fengya and Yuexin. The 2 of them stood in the living room and saw the 2 of us tearing each other apart. Xiao Fengya shouted at Duanmu-ke, "K, what are you doing? Stop it." She was about to rush forward. I found an opportunity to shake off Duanmu-ke and walk towards the stairs. Duanmu-ke reached out and grabbed me. I turned around and pushed his chest. I shouted at Duanmu-ke, "Duanmu-ke, that's enough. You're going too far. Let go of me. You want to leave. It's not that easy." Duanmu-ke reached out and pushed me. I lost my balance and slipped. I fell down the stairs. "Xiaoli!" I heard Xiao Fengya's voice. I fell down the stairs and landed in the living room. Xiao Fengya ran to my side and helped me up. She looked at me worriedly and said, "Xiaoli, how are you? Don't scare Mom. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" Tears flowed out of Xiao Fengya's eyes. I raised my hand with difficulty and touched Xiao Fengya's face. I forced out a smile and said, "Mom, I'm fine." After I finished speaking, my hand went limp and my consciousness gradually blurred. However, the last thing that entered my eyes was Duanmu-ke's anxious face. If only he could still remember me and still love me as much as he did in the past. How great would that be? I don't know how long I slept, but I felt like I had a long dream. When I opened my eyes again, I was already in a hospital room. My parents and Xiao Fengya were standing next to the bed, but Duanmu-ke was nowhere to be seen. Seeing that I had woken up, everyone was very excited. I looked at my parents. My mother's face was still glistening with tears, and my father's face was also serious. It seemed like they already knew the truth. I looked at my parents, then looked at Xiao Fengya and said, Mom, I want to talk to my parents. Xiao Fengya stared blankly for a moment, then smiled and said, Okay, I'll go get some food for you. After saying that, Xiao Fengya walked out of the room. My parents gathered around my bed. My mother took my hand and asked, Xiaoli, how are you feeling? How could you be so careless and fall down the stairs? You've made your parents so worried. Mom, I'm fine. Aren't I fine? I smiled and looked at my mother. My mother sighed and looked at me. Xiaoli, what do you want to talk to me and your father about? I hesitated for a moment, then looked at my parents and said, Mom, Dad, do you already know? My father glared at me and said, If this hadn't happened, how long would you have hidden it from us? I pursed my lips and looked at my father. Dad, I just didn't know how to tell you. That's right, Xiaoli. You shouldn't have hidden it from us. Do you know how worried your father and I were when we heard that you had fallen down the stairs? Without you by our side, I always felt that I couldn't take care of you. Your father and I have always been worried about you. My mother took my hand and wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. I held my mother's hand tightly and looked at her. Okay, let's not talk about this anymore. I'm fine now. I'll pay more attention in the future. At that moment, the door of the room opened and the doctor walked in. He looked at me, then flipped through the medical records and reports in his hands. My mother looked at the doctor and asked softly, Doctor, how is my daughter? The doctor looked at me, then looked at my mother. She's 4 weeks pregnant. Did you know that? What? My parents and I were shocked. I looked at the doctor and asked, How is that possible? How come I didn't realize that I was pregnant? The doctor closed the medical records and looked at me. Maybe it's because you've been very emotional recently, so you didn't notice. It's not too late to know now. You should rest well. We just finished the examination and your body is too weak. Chapter 98. Mother looked at the doctor and said, Doctor, she fell down the stairs. Is she all right? Did she hurt the baby in her belly? The doctor said, I just gave Miss Lang a thorough examination. Aside from some superficial injuries, everything else is normal. The baby in her belly is also very healthy. If Mr. Lang and Mrs. Lang don't think it's safe, I'll arrange for the nurse to prescribe you some nutrition medicine to protect the baby. Thank you. Mother's excited face became a bit red. The doctor nodded and left the room. Mother took my hand and said, Xiaoli, that's great. You have a baby. I smiled and looked at Mother. Yes, that's great. I'll be careful in the future. I gently touched my belly. It was incredible. There was a baby here that would be born in a few months. This is also very good. If the Duanmu family knows, the Duanmu K won't divorce you so easily. Mother was very excited. My face gradually became serious. I looked at Mother and said, Mom, I don't want to tell the Duanmu K and the Duanmu family about this yet. Why? Isn't this a good thing? If the Duanmu K knows you're pregnant, he'll also love you. Don't tell me he won't take responsibility. Mother said somewhat angrily. Father walked in front of me. He looked at me and said, Xiaoli is right. It's best if we don't let them know about this. Perhaps it'll be more troublesome if they know. Then are we going to hide this until the end? But after a long time the belly will show. Won't we be unable to hide it anymore? I took Mother's hand and said, Mom, I want to give birth to this child. Since the Duanmu K wants to divorce me, he probably won't try to keep me. I want to spend these 10 days in peace. After the divorce procedures are completed, I'll go home and give birth to the child. That's good, but I'm still worried. I'm afraid that Duanmu K will do something to hurt you again, his mother said worriedly. The father held the mother's shoulder and said, Don't worry. When Duanmu Tachio is discharged from the hospital, I'll call him and tell him to take good care of my daughter. If anything happens to my daughter, I'll immediately terminate the agreement. Dad, if I divorce Duanmu K, does that mean the agreement is invalid? She suddenly felt that she had let down the Red Minghui and the development of the family. My father looked at me and said, "As long as he can guarantee your safety until the divorce, I will draft another agreement to continue your marriage contract. In the past, I was too selfish, too stubborn, and used you as a bargaining chip in my career. But now that I know how much you've been hurt, I suddenly feel like a selfish father. I didn't take good care of you at all. I feel like I've failed in my duty." I had never heard my father say such heartwarming words to me before. I smiled at him and said, "Dad, I'm not good enough. I didn't do what I should have done. Thank you for being so understanding. Thank you for agreeing to take care of me and my future baby." My mother patted my head and said, "Silly child, why are you being so polite to your own parents? As long as you're well, we're happy." At that moment, Xiao Fengya pushed open the door to the room. She walked in and smiled at us. "What are you talking about? You look so happy." "Nothing much. You're back." My mother stood up and walked over to greet her. Xiao Fengya nodded and looked at my mother. "Yes, I just went to see Li Xiong. The doctor said that he'll be discharged tomorrow." My mother and father looked at each other. My mother looked at Xiao Fengya and said, "Xiao Fengya, I have something to trouble you with." Xiao Fengya took my mother's hand and said, "Sis, we're so close. If there's anything you need, you can just tell me directly." It's like this. Xiao Li's father and I are very worried about her. We know the details of the situation. Since Xiao Ke wants a divorce, Xiao Li isn't bad either. Our family has acquiesced. We just hope that in the next 10 days, you and Li Xiong can protect our child. Don't let her get hurt or wronged again. Our heart aches for our child. Xiao Fengya thought for a moment. She looked at my mother and said, "Sis, don't worry. When Xiao Li is discharged, I'll let her rest in the guest room. That way, she won't have any conflicts with Kay. As for Kay, we'll let his father teach him a lesson. What do you think? Then I'll leave it to you." "Thank you, Xiaoya." My mother held Xiao Fengya's hand tightly and nodded. The parents chatted in the room for a while, then left. I was the only one left in the room. It was past visiting hours, so no one would come to disturb me. Recently I felt very tired. Not only was my body tired, but my heart was even more tired. My parents kept their promise and didn't tell Xiao Fengya that I was pregnant. I gently touched my belly. I still couldn't believe that there was a baby inside. However, I was still very happy. At least it gave my scarred heart some comfort. I gradually felt sleepy. I closed my eyes and prepared to have a good sleep. Just then, the door of the ward seemed to be pushed open. I instantly opened my eyes and saw a figure standing motionlessly at the door. I forced myself to stand up. Looking at the door, I shouted, "Who is it?" The figure suddenly moved and walked towards me. I switched on the bedside lamp. When he walked closer, I saw that it was Duanmu Quebec. I saw that he was hugging his blanket tightly and staring at him without moving. Duanmu K was holding a bouquet of flowers in his hand. He put the flowers on the bedside table and pulled out a chair to sit down on the bedside chair. He sat there motionlessly and looked at me. I glanced at him and didn't dare to look at him. I lay down with my back facing Duanmu Quebec. I clutched my belly, but I didn't dare to close my eyes. I was afraid that he would do something to me. "Sorry." After a long time, Duanmu K said those 3 words. It seemed that he was talking about the argument he had with me and caused me to fall down the stairs. I didn't look at him and said softly, "It's okay." The atmosphere became tense again. After a while, I suddenly felt something touch my body. I turned around and saw Duanmu K lying on the edge of the bed, holding his head. He looked like he was in pain. I was about to reach out to touch him, but I stopped. After struggling for a long time, I put my hand on his head and said softly, "Are you okay?" Duanmu K shook his head. "I'm fine. It's just that every time I feel like I don't hate you that much, my head hurts really bad. I just need to rest for a while." Decide. "Why don't you go home and rest? It's getting late." Chapter 99. Duanmu raised his head and looked at me in astonishment. You know what I'm here for. I was stunned for a moment, then shook my head. I don't know. His eyes suddenly became very gentle, and for a moment, I felt that he had returned to his old self. When he saw my expression change, he immediately became very serious. He stood up with his back to me. I'm here to see how you're doing. It's best if you don't fall too badly. I don't want to pay for your medical bills. The cold water Duanmu poured on me instantly woke me up. I looked at his back and sneered. Don't worry. I don't need you to pay for anything. Duanmu paused for a moment. That's good. Then he pushed open the door of the ward and walked out. I was left alone in the ward. The quiet atmosphere made my warm heart turn cold again. I couldn't care less. He was no longer the person he used to be. Just let him be. And so, I stayed in the hospital for 2 more days. According to the doctor's instructions, I was discharged. On the day I was discharged, my parents, Xiao Fengya and Xinyao, all came to pick me up. My parents helped me pack my luggage, and Xiao Fengya helped me with the discharge procedures. Xinyao held my hand and looked at me with a worried expression. Sister-in-law, are you okay? After Dad and I were discharged, Mom told me about it. I was so angry. How could my brother be like that? Sister-in-law, are you okay now? Xinyao held my arm and looked at me carefully. I held her hand and said, Girl, I'm fine now. Much better. Don't worry. The main thing is, I have something I need to trouble you with. Xinyao looked at me suspiciously. Sister-in-law, if there's anything you need, just tell me. There's no need to be polite. What do you need me to do? As long as I can do it, I'll do my best. I looked at her with a smile and said, It's like this. After I go back, it won't be convenient for me to share a room with Xiao Quebec. However, I'm not used to living in the guest room at home. I want to stay in your room for a dozen or so days. When Duanmu and I agree to divorce, I'll leave. What do you think? Xinyao was stunned for a moment, then she looked at me and said, Sister-in-law, that's not a problem. I still want to live with sister-in-law, but I still can't accept the fact that you and my brother are divorced. When I go back, I must have a good talk with my brother. I must educate him. At this moment, my mother walked up to us. She looked at Xinyao and said, Xinyao, thank you for caring so much about our family, Shaoli. You don't have to talk to Duanmu anymore. Our family has already accepted this fact. So, for the next 10 days, please take care of our family, Shaoli. Xinyao looked at my mother and said, Auntie, don't worry. I will take good care of my sister-in-law. My brother won't bully her anymore. That's good. We're almost done. Let's go. My mother looked around the room to make sure she didn't leave anything behind. Then she pulled me out of the room. After we left the hospital, my parents didn't follow me back to Duanmu's house. I got into Xiao Fengya's car and drove with them to Duanmu's house. On the way home, Xinyao told me about Duanmu Tachio's situation. Because of the timely treatment, Duanmu Tachio's body didn't have any major problems. He had already returned home a day earlier than me. While we were talking, we arrived at Duanmu's house. When the car drove into the courtyard, Duanmu Uxin and Suri were waiting at the door to welcome us. After we got out of the car, they walked over to greet us. I walked past Duanmu and looked at him, but we didn't say anything. I walked straight into the living room. Duanmu Tachio was sitting on the sofa in the living room. When he saw us enter, he stood up and looked at me. You're back. How are you feeling? I smiled at Duanmu Tachio and said, Dad, I'm fine. I'm much better now. I made you worry. How are you? I'm fine. It's all thanks to this kid, Suri. He took me to the hospital in time and let me receive timely treatment. Did you bring this kid here? Duanmu Tachio asked me. At this time, Xinyao walked in front of me and looked at Duanmu Tachio. Dad, Suri is sister-in-law's personal bodyguard. She brought him here. But when you were in trouble, she didn't have time to tell you. Duanmu Tachio nodded. Oh, so that's how it is. Suri is a good kid. I don't have to worry about him following Xiao Li. In the future, let him follow Xiao Li. Also, tell the housekeeper to arrange a guest room for him. Suri quickly walked to the front and looked at Duanmu Tachio. Thank you, President Duanmu. Thank you. Duanmu Tachio smiled at Suri. Then he looked at me and said, Xiao Li, your father already called me. Since your elder brother has agreed, I'm willing to respect his decision. This time when I wasn't at home, something like this happened. It was an accident. But for Xiao Li's safety, I've decided to let Xiao Li stay in the guest room. Xiniao looked at me, then looked at Duanmu Lixiong and said, Father, don't let sister-in-law stay in the guest room. It's been a long time since I was able to endure the guest room. It's cold and cheerless. It's better to let sister-in-law stay with me. This way it'll be more convenient for us to talk, okay? Duanmu Tachio looked at me and nodded. Then he said to Xiniao, That's good too. Can rest assured. Wait. At that moment, Duanmu K walked in front of me from behind. He looked at my face and said, Dad, let her stay in the bedroom. I was stunned and looked at Duanmu Quebec. I couldn't guess what he meant. Was he going to continue torturing me? Duanmu Tachio looked at Duanmu K and said, K, you've already hurt Xiao Li so much. Why do you want her to go back? To continue being tortured by you? Duanmu K turned to Duanmu Tachio and said, Dad, I already know. I won't do it again. Also, I can vaguely remember a few things recently. She's in every one of them. I want to ask her something. As soon as Duanmu K finished speaking, Yuexin stuck to his side and looked at him. Duanmu, Gij, don't think about it. Did you forget? Once you think about it, your head hurts. Duanmu K shook his head. It really hurts. But recently, the images have become clearer and clearer. I can also see that the person is cold glaze. I keep feeling like I'm forgetting something. I remember now. Duanmu Tachio and Xiao Fengya looked at each other. Then they looked at Duanmu K and said, I don't think it's safe. After all, your temper is very bad right now. Duanmu K looked at Duanmu Tachio and said, Dad, I hope you can believe me. If I say I won't hurt her again, I definitely won't. Chapter 100. Duanmu Tachio looked at me. Xiao Li, what do you think? I glanced at Duanmu Quebec. He was also looking at me. I thought for a while, then looked at Duanmu Tachio. Dad, I'll go back. Sister-in-law. Xiniao pulled my arm. She looked at me and shook her head. Sister-in-law, don't go back. I promised Auntie that I would take good care of you. I held her hand. Don't worry. I'll be fine. If anything happens, I'll call you, okay? Xiniao pursed her lips. She walked in front of Duanmu Quebec. She pouted and looked at Duanmu Quebec. Gij, if you bully my sister-in-law again, I'll really get angry. Last time when I wasn't home, you caused my sister-in-law to fall down the stairs. I haven't settled that account with you yet. Duanmu K looked at Xiniao and didn't say anything. Yuexin wasn't happy. She looked at Xiniao and said, Xiniao, I think you misunderstood. Your sister-in-law was careless and fell down the stairs. Your Gij didn't push her. Before Yuexin could finish, Xiniao glared at her and said, Since when is it your turn to speak? Can't you see that our family is talking? I pulled Xiniao's arm, indicating that she shouldn't talk too much. I looked at Duanmu Tachio and said, Dad, it's decided. I'll go back to our bedroom. If anything happens, I'll tell you. Duanmu Tachio nodded. All right, let's do it. I turned to Xiao Fengya and said, Mom, I ate breakfast at the hospital. I won't eat lunch. Let's talk about dinner. I'm too weak. I want to rest. Xiao Fengya said, Okay, call me if you're hungry. I'll have the nanny bring you food. I smiled and said, Thank you, Mom. Dad, Mom, I'm going upstairs. Then I carried the luggage I'd brought back from the hospital and went upstairs to my bedroom. After returning to the bedroom, I closed the door and let out a deep sigh. What happened a few days ago was still vivid in my mind. Although I couldn't see the mess on the floor, The pain still made me feel a lingering fear. I threw my luggage on the floor next to the wardrobe and opened the wardrobe. I took out a quilt and put it on the bed. Then, I moved the quilt that was originally on the bed to the side where Dwanmu-K usually slept. I took off my shoes and lay under the quilt. Although I had returned, my heart was still empty. As I lay on the bed and let my imagination run wild, the bedroom door was suddenly pushed open. Dwanmu-K walked in and closed the door. He stood at the door and looked at me. I sat up and leaned against the headboard. I stared at him blankly. Dwanmu-K walked in front of me and sat down next to me. He looked at me and asked, "Are you still not feeling well?" I was stunned and shook my head. Then I looked at him and said, "I'm fine. I'll be fine after some rest." "Actually," Dwanmu-K paused. He continued, "Actually, I went to the hospital that day to apologize to you." "Apologize?" I stared at Dwanmu-K blankly. The atmosphere became a little awkward. Mother So coughed and said, "Forget it. Let's not talk about this anymore. You should have a good rest." I looked at him and nodded. The two of us sat there awkwardly for a while. Dwanmu-K kept looking at me. His eyes never left mine. I felt that the atmosphere was too awkward. I looked at Dwanmu-K and said, "Didn't you have some questions to ask me?" "Yes, I have a lot of questions to ask you, but I can't remember them." Dwanmu-K scratched his head and shook it hard. I thought for a while and looked at Dwanmu-Quebec. "You can ask me when you remember them. Anyway, there are only 10 days left." Dwanmu-K's sudden gentleness made me feel uncomfortable. I thought for a while and stood up from the bed. I put on my shoes and walked towards the door. Dwanmu-K suddenly asked, "What are you going to do?" I didn't look at him. With my back to him, I said, "I'm going to take a look at the garden and talk to Suri." Dwanmu-K stood up and looked at me. "You'd better keep your distance from Suri. Besides, he's not a threat to me. Think whatever you want. He's my personal bodyguard. He only listens to me." Then I pushed the door open and left the bedroom. Perhaps I was just imagining things, but Dwanmu-K's words clearly carried a hint of jealousy. Could it be that he had already regained consciousness? Or did he not forget me at all? Was he pretending not to know me? No matter how I looked at it, it didn't seem like it. Unknowingly, I walked to the rose pond in the garden. The flowers in the garden were still blooming brightly. It seemed that the flowers had been taken good care of while I was gone. Suri was already standing under the big tree next to the rose pond. Suri saw me and walked towards me. He said, "Miss Lung, why did you call me here?" I sat on the rattan chair next to the rose pond and looked at Suri. "Thank you for taking care of Dwanmu-Tachio for me." "Ha ha ha, you're too polite. As long as it's something you want me to do, I'll definitely do it." Suri smiled. I lowered my head and looked at Suri. "I've already agreed to the divorce. In 10 days we'll go through the divorce procedures." Suri squatted next to me and looked at me. "What? You agreed? But don't you love him? Why did you give up so easily?" I rolled up my sleeves and showed Suri the bruises that hadn't disappeared 2 days ago. Suri was shocked when he saw them. He looked at me in disbelief. "Did he do this? Did he also push you down the stairs? I'm going to find him now." After saying that, Suri wanted to get up, but I stopped him. I shook my head and looked at Suri. "Forget it. Don't go. I've already decided to divorce. There's no point in finding trouble with him." "Then what are you going to do?" Suri asked me. I gently touched my belly and said meaningfully, "Let's just live peacefully like this. Just think of it as doing it for the baby." Suri looked at me in shock. "What? You're pregnant?" I signaled Suri to lower his voice. "Lower your voice. I didn't tell Dwanmu's family about this. I only told you because you're a close friend. I hope you can keep this a secret for me." Surua nodded and said to me, "That's a must. Whatever you want to do, I'll listen to you and do it according to your wishes." I smiled and looked at Suri. "Thank you. You're really trustworthy. I really didn't see you." "Of course. Suri made a face at me. Chapter 101. You two seem to be having a good conversation. Just then, a man's voice sounded from behind the tree. Before I could react, Suri quickly rushed in front of me, shielding me behind him. He shouted in the direction of the voice. Who is it? A figure walked out from behind the tree. It was none other than Han Hao. Han Hao stood in front of me and Suri. He looked at us and said, Shaoli, can I speak with you alone? I hesitated and lowered my head. Suri turned to look at me and said, Miss Lung, do you want to speak with him? I looked up at Suri and said, You go do your work. Don't worry, he's not a bad person. Suri nodded and said, Okay, then I'll go do my work. Call me if you need anything. With that, Suri left, leaving only me and Han Hao. I turned around and sat on the rattan chair across from the rose pond. I looked at Han Hao and said, What do you want? Han Hao walked in front of me and suddenly squatted down. He took my hand, pulled up my sleeve and gently stroked my wound. He lifted his head and looked at me with a pained expression. Does it hurt? I shook my head and looked at him. It doesn't hurt. It's almost healed. It's fine. Han Hao took my hand and looked at me. He reached out and touched my face. Shaoli, can you give me some time to talk to you? If you want to confess to me, then don't. I won't agree. Han Hao suddenly raised his head and kissed me directly on the lips. I didn't have time to react. I stared at him with wide eyes. I reached out and pushed Han Hao's shoulder, but he held me in his arms. He held me so tightly that I couldn't struggle. I quietly felt Han Hao's warm lips warming my cold heart. After a while, Han Hao reached out and held me in his arms. He leaned his head on my shoulder and stroked my hair. Shaoli, be with me. I sighed. Sorry, Han Hao. I really can't promise you. Not before, not now, and not in the future. Han Hao looked at me. Why? Do you dare say that you don't have me in your heart? I looked hesitant. I didn't know what to say. I avoided Han Hao's gaze. He touched my face and said, Shaoli, look at me. I turned to look into Han Hao's eyes. His gaze was sincere. He looked at me and said, I won't force you to do anything that you don't want to do. I just hope that you can give me a chance to take care of you. Even if I can only quietly accompany you, I'll be satisfied. I sighed and looked at Han Hao. I really can't promise you. Whether it's you, Xiao Ke, Xin Yao, or me, I can't promise you anything. I can't let our relationship become a stalemate. That's definitely not the problem. Is there something that you can't tell me? Can you tell me? I'll share it with you. I was very conflicted. I couldn't tell him that I was pregnant. I kept my mouth shut, not knowing how to open it. It was at this moment that a voice rang out from the depths of the garden, connected to the house. Big brother Han Hao. Han Hao stood up and looked in that direction. Someone walked out from the depths of the garden. It was none other than Xin Yao. Xin Yao stood there and looked at us. Her face was full of tears. She looked at me and said softly, Sister-in-law. I stood up and looked at Xin Yao. I felt very awkward. Xin Yao. Xin Yao didn't move. She just stood there, tears flowing from the corners of her eyes. Han Hao and I stood in front of her, not knowing what to say. Xin Yao wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. She forced a smile and looked at us. Brother Han Hao, sister-in-law, I'm sorry. I just got here. I didn't mean to eavesdrop on your conversation. I looked at Xin Yao and my heart ached. It seemed that what I didn't want to happen had happened. Han Hao suddenly said to Xin Yao, Xin Yao, I think it's time to tell you. I think you know that the one I like is Shaoli. I know you like me. I tried to like you, but I couldn't. Shaoli has been in my heart for a long time. I'm sorry. Han Hao's eyes were full of guilt. Xin Yao lowered her head. I was very worried and walked towards her. I raised my hand and wanted to touch her hair. I could feel her twitching and my heart was also very uncomfortable. Suddenly, Xinyao opened her mouth and said, I know that you like sister-in-law. I also know that I can't replace sister-in-law's position in your heart. Every time I see you and sister-in-law together, you smile very happily. But when you're with me, if you're not reading a book, you're playing with your phone, and your face is also expressionless. Although I know the truth, my heart still feels very uncomfortable. I gently stroked Xinyao's hair. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what to say. Han Hao walked over to us. He looked at Xinyao and said, Xinyao, I know how you feel about me. Before Xiao Li got married, I did have feelings for her. But after she got married to Duanmu Ke, I hid my feelings for her. A while ago, when I found out that she and Xiao Ke were going to get divorced, my feelings for her became stronger and stronger. That's why I confessed to her. It's because I want to take care of her. She needs someone to take care of her the most right now. I turned around and looked at Han Hao. I signaled him not to agitate Xinyao anymore. Xinyao suddenly raised her head and hugged me. She leaned on my shoulder and cried loudly. I hugged her tightly. I didn't expect that the person who didn't want to hurt her the most would become the one who hurt her the most. My heart was filled with guilt. I could only quietly accompany her and give her a little bit of comfort. Just like that, I stood there with Xinyao in my arms for a while. Han Hao quietly stayed by my side and didn't say anything. After a while, Xinyao raised her head. I helped her wipe the tears on her face. Xinyao looked at me. Her eyes were still as gentle as ever. She looked at me and said, Sister-in-law, no matter what, I like you. I want to be with you. Although I like Gij Han Hao likes you very much. Since my brother doesn't cherish you, I also hope that you can seriously consider Gij Han Hao. I believe that he will love you very much, just like how I love you. Hearing Xinyao's words, I felt even more uncomfortable. I stroked Xinyao's hair and said, Silly girl, don't think too much. I don't have the mood to think about feelings for the time being. Hearing me say that, Han Hao raised his head and looked at me. His eyes flashed with disappointment, but he didn't say anything. Xinyao held my face. After she calmed down, she looked at me and said, Sister-in-law, can you promise me something? No matter what it is, can you promise me first? Chapter 102. I sighed and looked at Xinyao. If you want me to be with Han Hao, I won't agree. Xinyao looked at me. Sister-in-law, you have to promise me that you will take good care of yourself. No matter what happens, no matter who you meet, you have to take good care of yourself. No matter who is by your side in the future, you can't let yourself be wronged. Because if I see you being wronged, my heart will hurt too. I touched Xinyao's crying face and said, Okay, I promise you. Don't worry, I will take good care of myself. I turned and looked at Han Hao. Han Hao talked to Xinyao. It's getting late. I'm going back. Then I turned and walked past Han Hao, heading to the living room. On the way back, my mood was very complicated. It wasn't that I didn't have Han Hao in my heart, it was just that I was pregnant and couldn't accept Han Hao. I didn't want my child and me to be a burden to him. As I spoke, I walked up the stairs and arrived at the bedroom door. Suddenly, I wondered if Duanmu Ke was still in the bedroom. Whatever, I would have to face it sooner or later. I pushed open the bedroom door and entered the room. Duanmu Ke was lying on the bed. His face pale and his forehead covered in sweat. I hurried to his side and wiped the sweat off his face. It was cold. Duanmu Ke's brows were tightly furrowed. He looked really uncomfortable. As I wiped the tears off his face, I softly called out his name. Xiao Ke, wake up. What's wrong? Are you not feeling well? Xiao Ke, can you hear me? Duanmu Ke didn't respond. His eyes were tightly shut, and he still looked like he was in pain. I was a little worried. Just as I was about to turn and call the housekeeper, Duanmu Ke reached out and grabbed my arm. I turned around and saw that his eyes were still tightly shut. He kept calling, Wifey. Wifey. I sat next to him and held his hand tightly. Looking at him now, I was very worried. How could this happen? I held his hand and wiped the sweat off his forehead again and again. Gradually, his expression became less painful. I heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that he was fine. However, he was still holding my hand tightly. I didn't want to let go. I was afraid that I would wake him up. It wasn't easy for him to fall asleep. If I were to wake him up again, he might feel uncomfortable. Just like that, I didn't know how much time had passed. I held Dwanmu-K's hand and lay next to him. Unknowingly, I fell asleep. This was the most peaceful sleep I'd had in the past few days. It was as if I had returned to the time when Dwanmu-K and I were still loving each other. It was as if I could see that gentle and handsome face that had stayed by my side and never left. When I woke up again, it was already evening. There was no light in the room, so it was dark. I opened my eyes and saw a handsome face in front of me. He was staring at me with his eyes wide open. I was so shocked that I sat up. My face was red, and I didn't know what to do. After thinking for a while, I crawled out of his arms and sat in front of the dressing table. I fiddled with the things on the table, but I didn't say anything. I glanced at the time. It was already past dinner time. I looked at Dwanmu-K through the mirror. He was leaning against the headboard and looking at me expressionlessly. I blushed again. With my back to him, I said, "You must be hungry. Do you want to eat something? I'll go downstairs and make it." Dwanmu-K still didn't say anything. He just sat there and looked at me expressionlessly. I sighed. "Forget it. I'll go make something and bring it to you." I stood up and walked to the door. "Wait a minute." Dwanmu-K called out to me. I turned around and looked at him. He looked at me and said, "I want to eat something hot." I looked at him and smiled. Then I turned and walked out of the bedroom. I went to the kitchen and cooked 2 bowls of vegetable porridge. I added some side dishes and brought them to the bedroom. After entering the bedroom, I brought the porridge to Dwanmu-K and handed him the bowl. He wolfed it down. I sat on the edge of the bed and drank the porridge while looking at him from time to time. I had only taken a few mouthfuls, but he had already finished the entire bowl. Then he looked at my bowl with eager eyes. I immediately understood what he meant. I handed my bowl to him and said, "You can eat it." Dwanmu-K hesitated for a moment, but still took the bowl. In a few mouthfuls, he finished the 2 bowls of porridge. I took the empty bowl and brought it to the kitchen. After I cleaned up, I cut some fruit and brought it to the bedroom. Dwanmu-K sat at the head of the bed and ate the fruit while looking at me. His eyes had become very strange. They weren't gentle like before, nor were they cruel like before. It was as if he was savoring me, which made me feel very uncomfortable. I reached out and touched his forehead. His temperature was normal and he wasn't sweating anymore. It seemed that he was fine. I suddenly remembered that he was sweating, so I touched the bedsheet. It was damp. I sighed and took out a set of Dwanmu-K's clothes from the wardrobe. I also took out a bedsheet, a quilt cover, and 2 pillowcases. I handed the clothes to Dwanmu-Quebec. Looking at him, I said, "Go take a shower. When you're done, just throw the clothes into the washing machine." Then, I pulled the quilt aside and began to take off the quilt cover. Dwanmu-K hugged the clothes and looked at me. He didn't move. I looked at him and said, "Go quickly. Do you want to use the bathtub? If you do, I'll go fill the tub." I put down the quilt cover and walked to the bathroom. Suddenly, Dwanmu-K stopped me. He said, "Why are you so good to me?" I stopped in my tracks. Hearing him say that, my heart ached. Yes, why am I so good to him? A man who once loved me and hurt me. Why am I so good to him? I sighed and said, "It's nothing. It's just a small matter." I walked to the bathroom, turned on the tap, and began to fill the tub. I sat by the tub and watched the water flow. My complicated heart gradually calmed down. Dwanmu-K stood at the bathroom door and looked at me. He was naked, and he put his new clothes on the sink. He took off his dirty clothes and threw them into the washing machine. I raised my head and glanced at him. Then I stared at the tap, waiting for it to finish. I'll do it. You go and rest. Duan Mu Kei's tone became very gentle. Suddenly made me feel uncomfortable. I looked at him and thought, if he wants to do it himself, then let him do it himself. I stood up and looked at him. You're sweating so much. Don't soak for too long. Call me if you need anything. I walked past him. He suddenly pulled me and said, Don't go. If you're not busy, come and help me wipe my back. Chapter 103. I turned around and looked at Duanmu Quebec. I didn't understand what he was thinking. Duanmu Kei seemed to see my confusion. He looked at me and said, If you think it's too much, then forget it. I was stunned. I looked at him and said, It's not too much. You wash up first. I'm going to change into something more comfortable. I looked at him and walked out of the bathroom. I stood at the bathroom door and heard the sound of running water. It seemed that Duanmu Kei had already started showering. I sighed and walked to the wardrobe. I opened it and took out one of Duanmu Kei's jerseys. I changed into it. It was his fault for tearing my clothes to shreds. I had no choice but to wear his jerseys. After changing my clothes, I went to the bathroom door. I knocked on the door and Duanmu Kei said from inside, Come in. I pushed the door open and walked in. He was lying in the bathtub with only his head sticking out. I glanced at him and didn't say anything. I took a wet towel and wrapped it around my hand. I looked at Duanmu Kei and asked, Are you done? Can I start now? Duanmuk opened his eyes and nodded at me. Then he turned his back to me and said, That's enough. I reached for a small wooden stool and placed it behind him. I sat in front of his back and used the wet towel to gently wipe his back. I asked softly, How's the temperature? Moderate or slightly cool or hot? Duanmu Kei turned his head and looked at me. Not bad. You can use more strength. I agreed and gently wiped his back. Looking at Duanmu Kei's back, I felt that this figure was very familiar. It didn't seem like a stranger anymore. It was as if the person I used to know had returned. For a moment I was stunned and stopped what I was doing. Duanmu Kei turned his head and looked at me. He asked in confusion, What's wrong? Why did you stop? His words brought me back to reality from my reverie. I returned to my senses and continued to brush against his back. Not much, I whispered. Duanmu Kei thought for a while and said to me, Dad, Mom and Xinyao told me about our marriage. Although I didn't admit it at first, I've gradually gotten used to it. There were several times when I was half asleep and half awake. I could always feel your figure appear in my mind. I've asked them, but they couldn't tell me what we did when we were together. When I think about it, my head hurts. There were several times when I deliberately forced myself to try hard to remember, but I couldn't remember. Hearing Duanmu Kei's words, my heart was a little excited. It seemed that he still had an impression of me in his mind. But thinking that he had decided to divorce me, my heart was very sad. I said softly, Don't think about it. Since you've decided to give up, what's the point of thinking about it again? It's useless. So, when I was with you, I had a lot of good memories. Duanmu Kei turned to look at me, his eyes sparkling with expectation. I don't want you to go back to the hospital right after you came back. I refused in my heart. I hugged my chest and hid in the corner of the door. I looked at Duanmu Kei and shook my head. There's really no need. There's really no need. However, Duanmu Kei didn't want to let me go. He walked in front of me and took off his clothes. Then he reached for my pants. I was afraid that he would be impulsive and hurt the baby in my stomach. I quickly grabbed his hand and said, I'll do it myself. I'll do it myself. Then, under Duanmu Kei's watch, I obediently took off all my clothes and stood naked in front of Duanmu Quebec. It was true. Logically speaking, we were an old married couple who had lived together for a while. This shouldn't be a big deal. However, I was still a little embarrassed to be naked like this. Chapter 104. Duan Muke looked at me standing naked in the corner. He nodded in satisfaction. He pulled me to the front of the bathtub and draped a towel over me. He drained all the water he'd soaked in and brushed the corners of the bathtub. Then he filled the bathtub with water. He stood up and looked at me. Get in. I didn't understand Duan Muke's actions. I looked at him in confusion. What is the meaning of this? Duan Muke paused and looked at me. I wasn't feeling well in the afternoon. I was sweating all over. You were by my side the whole time, right? I'm guessing you're covered in my sweat. You should wash up. I understood Duan Muke's meaning. I shook my head and looked at Duan Muke, saying, No need, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'll go out first. With that, I retreated towards the door. Duan Muke suddenly crouched down and picked me up horizontally. He took off his slippers and stepped into the bathtub. Then he placed me in the bathtub. Since the bathtub was small, I didn't have time to react. Duan Muke placed me in front of him. With my back facing him, I could feel his strong heartbeat. Neither of us spoke. At that moment, it felt as if the space around us had frozen. Duan Muke wet the towel and gently wiped my back. A few days ago, when I was fighting with Duan Muke and fell down the stairs, the injuries were still very obvious. I could feel Duan Muke's fingertips gently grazing the scars on my back. It was just a simple physical touch, but I could vaguely feel his sadness. But I couldn't accept this kind of warmth. The him now and the him a few days ago were two completely different people. I didn't know which was the real him. I didn't move. I sat in Duan Muke's arms and let him stroke my back. He stroked the bruises that he'd caused. Because my shoulders weren't soaked in the water, I felt a little cold. I lowered my head and hugged my shoulders. Just then, Duan Muke hugged me from behind. In an instant, my entire body warmed up. My face grew redder and redder. I wanted him to let me go, but I didn't know what to say. Just as I was hesitating, Duan Muke suddenly opened his mouth and said, I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I knew that he was apologizing to me for falling down the stairs with him 2 days ago. I was indeed heartbroken towards him. But what was this tenderness of his? I didn't know either. I could only comfort myself again and again, telling myself that the Duan Muke now wasn't the same as before. It was impossible for him to love and care for me. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but sigh. My sigh stunned Duan Muke. He was still hugging me. What's wrong? Are you not feeling well? I moved Duan Muke's hand away. I turned around and sat across from Duan Muke, looking at that familiar yet strange face. I said, I think the two of us need to talk. Okay, go ahead. Duan Muke looked at me, his expression becoming a little serious. I sorted out my emotions. I looked at Duan Muke and said, Tell me, why are you suddenly so nice to me? Didn't you annoy me to the point that you wanted to kill me? Why are you so passionate now? Duan Muke sighed. He looked at me and said, I have indeed forgotten everything that happened between us. But when I think of you, my heart doesn't feel pain but happiness. I'm becoming more and more interested in you. I admit that I did hate you. I did do a lot of things to hurt you. I won't deny that. It's too late. It's already too late. There are only 12 days until our divorce date. I don't have many requests. I just hope that you can let me spend these 12 days in peace. I'll be satisfied. I don't want to have anything to do with you. As for whether you want to remember it or not, it doesn't have much to do with me, because I don't have you in my heart anymore. It took a lot of courage for me to say these words, but as soon as I said them, my heart broke painfully. I stood up from the bathtub and calmed myself down. Looking at Duan Muke, I said, I'll go out first. With that, I stepped out of the bathtub and walked towards the door. You're not a woman who can lie, Duan Muke said from behind me. Your tears betrayed you. You say you have no feelings for me, but in your heart, you can't bear to part with me. Seems that you have feelings for me. I stopped and turned to look at Duan Muke. You're wrong. I have feelings for the old Duan Muke, not for a cold-blooded monster like you. Duanmu smiled coldly. He looked at me and said, "Since you said that, it seems that I should keep you by my side so that I can slowly torture you. How about this? Since I can divorce you, I can also choose not to. The right is in my hands. I believe that you can do that, but you can't restrict my freedom. Since I agreed to divorce you, I can also choose not to continue being with you. You don't have to threaten me. Since it's come to this, I have nothing to be afraid of. All right, I'm going to sleep." Then I walked out of the bathroom. The moment I closed the door, my heart started to beat faster and faster. Felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. I didn't know if my words had angered him. Hope not. Right now, nothing was more important than the child in my belly. As long as he didn't hurt my child, or rather our child, it would be fine. Although he didn't know, I didn't know how to face Duanmu and the entire Duanmu family. I calmed down and walked to the side of the bed. I lay down on the side of the bed where I had laid the quilt. As I crawled under the quilt, a wave of sleepiness hit me. I prepared to go to sleep early. After all, my body was still very weak. Just as I was half awake, I vaguely felt Duanmu walk out of the bathroom and lie down on the bed. I didn't say anything and just moved to the side of the bed. I was afraid that if I squeezed him, he would find a chance to fly into a rage. I could feel Duanmu tossing and turning for a while. Then he stopped moving. I guessed that he had gone to sleep. Before I could finish my thoughts, Duanmu arm pressed against my body. His hand happened to cover my breasts. I blushed and reached out to pat his hand. "Take it away," I whispered. Duanmu didn't speak, nor did he take his hand away. I was a little angry. I turned to look at him and said angrily, "What do you want to do?" Without waiting for me to finish, Duanmu lips had already deeply kissed mine. Chapter 105. I stared at Duanmu with my eyes wide open. He closed his eyes and kissed me deeply on the lips. I didn't push him away. I didn't know why I didn't reject him. Maybe my hatred for him couldn't overcome the feelings I had for him deep in my heart. After a while, Duanmu opened his eyes. He looked at me in surprise, then immediately pushed me away and turned his back to me. I was stunned by his actions. I reached out to touch his arm, but I stopped. I turned around and leaned against the side of the bed. My head kept replaying the scene that had just happened, and I didn't feel good about it. After a while, Duanmu asked me softly, "Are you asleep?" "No." I didn't do it on purpose. I don't know why I did it. My body couldn't help but get close to you. "I'm sorry," Duanmu explained calmly. Indeed, I had expected this answer. I sighed and said softly, "It's fine." Although I said it was fine, my heart was bleeding. "It's fine. Go to sleep." Hearing Duanmu say that, I didn't say anything. I had been with him for a long time, and I understood his temper and personality. However, my feelings for him had never disappeared. Just like that, the two of us slept with our backs against each other. When I woke up the next day, he was no longer in bed. Looking at the empty room, my heart was filled with sorrow. In about 10 days, this place would no longer belong to me. Even if I didn't want to leave, what use would it be? There was nothing left for me to stay here. After I simply freshened up, I walked out of the bedroom. Coincidentally, I met Xinyao, who was about to go eat breakfast. We looked at each other and I could feel that Xinyao was stunned for a moment. Then she became very embarrassed. After that, she had a very difficult expression. I guessed that Han Hao had already told her about it yesterday, but she just couldn't accept it. I took a step forward and walked in front of Xinyao. Holding her arm, I smiled and said to her, "Good morning, girl." Xinyao saw that I took the initiative to greet her. She smiled and said, "Good morning, sister-in-law." Seeing Xinyao's smile, my heart felt a lot better. I looked at Xinyao and touched her face. "How did you sleep last night? Your eyes are a bit red and swollen and there are dark circles under your eyes. Did you not rest well?" "Ah, it can't be." Xinyao quickly ran to her bedroom and took out a small mirror. Then, she looked at herself in the mirror and looked up and down. She looked at me with an aggrieved expression and said, "Oh my God! It was really swollen. I really have dark circles." I shook my head helplessly and patted her shoulder. "Don't worry, I have an eye cream in my room. Pretty good. After breakfast, come to my room and I'll give it to you." "Wow! This is great. Thank you, sister-in-law." Xinyao hugged me and acted like a spoiled child. I gently stroked her hair and thought about yesterday's events. I said to her softly, "Girl, Han Hao didn't say anything to hurt you yesterday, right?" Xinyao looked at me. First she was stunned. Then she sighed and said, "He didn't say anything. Han Hao Gij and I have already talked about it." Xinyao moved closer to my ear and whispered, "No matter what, if Gij really wants a divorce, I really hope that you and Han Hao Gij can be together. No matter what, you are my sister-in-law." I shook my head and looked at Xinyao. "I won't choose him." Xinyao grabbed my hand and said to me calmly, "Sister-in-law, you have to believe me. I've already let it go. I also know that Han Hao Gij has feelings for you. Course, I also know that you have Han Hao Gij in your heart. So, sister-in-law, I'm really doing this for your happiness." Before I could answer, I heard a voice behind me. "You're already looking for your next home." I turned around and saw that it was Yuexin. She crossed her arms and leaned against the wall, looking at us. Yuexin sneered and looked at me. "It's no wonder. You lost favor with Duanmu Gij, so naturally you want to find someone else. It's not your fault, but you're destroying your best friend's happiness. It's not right." Before I could answer, Xinyao walked in front of me. She looked at Yuexin and said fiercely, "Yuexin, you don't need to drive a wedge between us. This is between me and my sister-in-law. No matter what, it's better than a bad woman like you who steals someone else's husband." Yuexin sneered and looked at Xinyao. "You're really stupid. You just gave your beloved man to her. You don't think this is a coincidence, do you? Don't you think this was all planned by her?" Yuexin pointed at me and asked Xinyao. Xinyao glared at Yuexin. She calmed down and then said loudly to Yuexin, "Compared to you, I believe in my sister-in-law more. No matter what, as long as my sister-in-law and Han Hao are together, I will wish them happiness. This matter has nothing to do with you. I'm in a good mood today and don't want to fight with you. Please leave." Xinyao pointed at the stairs and signaled Yuexin to leave. The three of us looked at each other like this. At this time, Duanmu K walked up the stairs. He looked at Yuexin, then looked at me and Xinyao and said coldly, "Why aren't you guys going down to eat breakfast? Dad and Mom are already rushing you. Hurry up and go down." Xinyao glared at Yuexin, then pulled me and said, "Sister-in-law, let's go eat. Don't pay attention to her." Xinyao pulled me past Duanmu Quebec. Duanmu K's eyes never left me. As Xinyao and I walked down the stairs, we heard Duanmu K's voice behind us. "Xin, do you have something going on today? If you don't, come with me to a place." Hearing Duanmu K's words, my heart was shocked. I turned my head and looked out of the corner of my eyes. Yuexin was snuggling up to Duanmu K's arm like a little girl, but Duanmu K's expression was still cold. Although I felt uncomfortable, I didn't show it. After Xinyao and I had a simple breakfast, she pulled me back to her bedroom. Since Duanmu K tore my clothes, I didn't have any clothes to wear. Xinyao helped me look through her wardrobe. As she picked out clothes, she told me a lot of things that happened between her and Han Hao when they were young. The two of us talked very happily. At this time there was a knock on the door. Xinyao called out to the door, "Who is it? Please come in." The housekeeper opened the door. She stood at the bedroom door and looked at me and Xinyao. She said, young mistress, young Master Han Hao has arrived. He's downstairs in the living room. Young mistress personal bodyguard, Suri, is also there. Young Master Han Hao told me to come up and tell you." Chapter 106. I nodded and looked at the nanny. "Okay, I got it. You can leave now. Tell them we'll be right down. The nanny nodded, closed the door and left. Xinyao took out some clothes from the wardrobe and looked at me. Sister-in-law, let's go out for a picnic today. It'll be just the four of us. We won't bring my brother. I don't like him recently, so I don't want to see him. I looked at her with some hesitation. I don't think that's a good idea. I said I won't leave this house before we get married. If we go out to play, that's fine. What's that? If you don't leave this house, then you won't live apart. You can't even go out to play. It's fine. If my brother doesn't agree, I'll tell him. Xinyao took out a set of exquisite casual clothes and looked at me. Sister-in-law, why don't you wear this? It'll suit us when we go out to play today. I picked up the clothes and looked at them. This is too pretty. You should keep it for yourself. Xinyao pushed the clothes to me and looked at me. No. I want you to wear it. You'll definitely look good in it. I smiled and looked at Xinyao. I took Xinyao's clothes and changed into them. After Xinyao changed, we packed our bags and walked out of the bedroom. When we went downstairs, Han Hao and Suri were really sitting in the living room waiting for us. I didn't know what they were talking about, but they seemed to be very excited. When they saw me and Xinyao come down, they stood up. Han Hao looked at me and said, "How was it? Did you rest well yesterday?" I looked at Han Hao and said, "It's nothing. It was pretty good. You guys came early. Just now, the girl told me that the weather was pretty good today and wanted to go out for a picnic. How about it? Do you guys have time to do me the honor of going out together?" Han Hao smiled, then looked at us and said, "Since Miss Lang and Duanmu are interested, then of course I have to serve you to the end. Isn't that right, Suri?" Han Hao gave Suri a meaningful glance. Suri immediately understood what Han Hao meant. He looked at me and said, "Of course." Looking at Suri's fawning expression, we all laughed. Right at this moment, the sound of a chainsaw came from outside the door. I looked at the door and asked, "What's that noise?" Han Hao glanced at the door and then said to me, "I don't know." When I arrived, I saw several workers walking towards the park. Walking towards the park. I looked at Han Hao in confusion. "That's right. Look, it's over at the rose garden." Han Hao sat on the sofa and picked up a cup of coffee. "No!" I shouted. I threw down my backpack and ran towards the rose garden. I hoped that what I was thinking hadn't happened. I ran to the rose garden pond. Several workers were using a chainsaw to sweep up the roses. Broken flowers were scattered all over the pond. It was a complete mess. What I didn't want to happen happened. I shouted at them, "Stop!" The workers looked at me blankly and stopped what they were doing. I looked at them and shouted, "Who is it? Who told you to do this?" One of the workers looked at me and said, "The housekeeper arranged for us to come here. He told us to tear down the rose garden pond." I calmed myself down and looked at them. "All right," I said. "Stop right there. How much did the housekeeper give you? Give me a price and I'll pay. Take the money and get out of here." I pointed toward the door. "That won't do. If you do this, it won't be good for me. Won't it affect our work?" The worker was still not happy. Just as I was about to open my mouth, Duanmu K suddenly came out from the side door of the house. He stood under the tree and looked at me. "I told them to come here." I looked at Duanmu K, my face ugly. I asked him calmly, "Why did you do this?" Duanmu K looked at me. "No reason. I don't like this rose garden pond. I'd rather build a fountain. I don't like that rattan chair either. I'll have to trouble you to tear it down for me later." Duanmu K pointed at the rattan chair I used to rest in. It seemed that he wanted to destroy all my memories. I quickly walked forward and stood in front of the rattan chair. I looked at Duanmu K and said, "No, you can't tear it down." At this moment, Xan Yao and the others arrived. They saw me standing in front of the rattan chair and several workers in front of me. Suri quickly stood in front of me. He looked at the workers, afraid that they would hurt me. "What's going on here? Brother, don't tell me you want to tear it down." This won't do, brother. This is sister-in-law's favorite place. Xinyao looked at Duanmu Ke, and also pleaded for me. Duanmu Ke looked at me calmly and said, "But this isn't my favorite place. If I say tear it down, then tear it down. Hurry up and tear it down. Otherwise I won't pay you." With that, the workers started the chainsaw again and swept away the roses. No! I bypassed Suri and ran towards the rose pond. I tried to stop them, but I didn't expect to be hugged by Han Hao. Han Hao hugged my waist from behind. I waved my arms, trying to break free from Han Hao's embrace. However, Han Hao held me very tightly. No matter how hard I struggled, I could only watch as the roses in the garden were destroyed before my eyes. My tears couldn't stop flowing. I collapsed in Han Hao's embrace. I didn't know what to do. I cried myself hoarse. Everyone stood there and looked at me. Han Hao turned me around and hugged me tightly. He stroked my hair and said softly, "Don't cry, don't cry. There will be more in the future." I tugged at Han Hao's clothes, my mind blank. Xinyao stood next to me and kept wiping my tears with a tissue. Her face was full of worry. At this time a worker asked Duanmu Ke, "Young Master Duanmu, the flowers in the flower pond have been cut. Do you still want to tear down the rattan chair?" "Tear it down." The word seemed to have been squeezed out of Duanmu Ke's mouth and fiercely pierced my ears. I turned around and looked at Duanmu Quebec. I shook my head at him and said, "Don't tear it down anymore. I'm begging you, okay?" Duanmu Ke just stood there and looked at me. He didn't say a word. The workers felt a little embarrassed. But in the face of monetary benefits, they chose to listen to Duanmu Ke's instructions and walked towards the rattan chair. At this moment, Su Rue quickly walked over to the rattan chair. He stood in front of the chair and looked at the workers. He then looked at Duanmu Ke and said loudly, "If any of you dare to tear down this chair, I'll tear him down." Duanmu Ke raised his head and looked at Suri. "Suri, right? This is my Duanmu's home. No matter how you look at it, it's not your place to interrupt. Didn't your master teach you etiquette?" Chapter 107. Suri's face turned red. He glared at Duanmu Ke, but he didn't say anything. Han Hao hugged me. He looked at Duanmu Ke and said, "Xiao Ke, you've gone too far. That rattan chair isn't a problem. Why do you have to tear it down?" Duanmu Ke looked at Han Hao, his eyes sharp. He said to Han Hao, "How long are you going to hug my woman? We haven't even divorced yet. How dare you act so recklessly?" I pushed Han Hao away and walked in front of Duanmu Quebec. My face was still wet with tears. I looked into his eyes and pointed at the unrecognizable flower pond. "Duanmu Ke, you've already destroyed my most beloved flower pond. Seems like you don't care about me anymore. How could you be so cruel?" Duanmu Ke sneered. "There's nothing cruel about it. If Yuexin hadn't told me that this place had been remodeled, I wouldn't have known that this place had been built here. Originally, this place was supposed to be a fountain, but it was turned into a flower pond instead. I really don't like flowers and it was ugly, so I tore it down. It's that simple." "Shut up." I lowered my head and said to Duanmu Quebec, "Anyway, you won't be staying here for long. I can do whatever I want. You can't do anything about it." Duanmu Ke reached out and lifted my chin. He looked into my eyes and said softly, "So you don't have to worry about it. There's no need to look like a madman here. After all, you're still the young mistress of the Duanmu family. Pay attention to your status. Don't ruin the reputation of the Duanmu family." Hearing Duanmu Ke's words, I couldn't suppress the anger in my heart. I reached out, raised my arm, and with a paw sound, a loud slap landed on Duanmu Ke's face. Duanmu Ke stood there, holding his face, and blanked out. "Shaoli!" I heard Han Hao's voice. He ran to my side and quickly pulled me into his arms. Suri also rushed in front of me and shielded me behind him. Xinyao also ran over and pulled me back. Before I could react, Duanmu K was already in front of us. He reached out and grabbed my collar. I was so scared that I closed my eyes. Duanmu K's actions were stopped by Suri. Han Hao took the opportunity to carry me and retreat. "Let go of me." Duanmu K shook off Suri's arm and stood there, glaring at me. Han Hao looked at Duanmu K and said, "Xiao K, you've gone too far. How could you hit her?" Duanmu K glanced at Han Hao, then looked at me and said, "What I do with my own woman, when did it become your business? I don't want to lose my temper with you. Take Xinyao and leave quickly." Han Hao didn't let go of me. He looked at me and gently stroked my hair, indicating that I shouldn't be afraid. Then he raised his head and said to Duanmu K, "You don't cherish her, but I do. Since we've already decided to divorce, you shouldn't interfere with who Xiaoli chooses to be with." "Han Hao, don't force me." Duanmu K's eyes widened as he roared at Han Hao. Han Hao sneered and looked at him. "Today I must take Xiaoli away. I've had enough. I don't want to see you torture her anymore." Han Hao turned and glanced at Xinyao. "Xinyao, please tell uncle and auntie that I borrowed Xiaoli. If anything happens, I'll take responsibility." "Can you take responsibility?" Duanmu K wanted to rush over again, but Suri stopped him. Duanmu K roared at Suri, "Get lost!" Han Hao looked at Suri and said, "Suri, ignore him. After I leave, go back to the Leng residence and tell uncle and auntie what happened. Tell them that I took Xiaoli away." Then Han Hao picked me up and walked towards the door. He looked at me, his eyes full of tenderness. He said to me, "I'm going all out. For you, anything is worth it." Han Hao carried me to the door. I wrapped my arms around Han Hao's neck and looked behind him. I saw Duanmu K's frowning face. Was he reluctant? Or was he willing? The destruction of the Rose Pond had pretty much destroyed my love for Duanmu, Quebec. After leaving the Duanmu residence and getting into Han Hao's car, I was like a zombie. My eyes were empty and my mind was blank. I couldn't remember anything, and I didn't want to remember anything. When we arrived at the Duanmu K residence, Han Hao pulled me to the living room. Han Hao's father was sitting in the living room. Han Hao looked at his father and said, "Dad, this is Cold Glaze. She'll be staying with us for a few days. Dad, I'll take her upstairs first." "Stop right there." Han Hao's father stopped him. Han Hao stopped and turned to look at his father. Then he looked at me. He called a housekeeper over and asked her to arrange a room for me. Then, he gently patted my shoulder and turned to walk back to his father. The housekeeper brought me to a guest room at the corner of the stairs. She simply decorated the room, then closed the door and left. I was curious about what Han Hao's father wanted to talk to him about, so I quietly opened the door a little. I could hear the conversation between Han Hao and his father downstairs. Han Hao's father asked, "Hao, do you know what you're doing? You brought back Duanmu K's wife. Duanmu Tochio's daughter-in-law. Duanmu K just called me and asked if Cold Glaze was in our house. Said no. Now you've brought her back. What's going on? Hurry up. Hurry up and send her back." "Dad, I won't send her back. She's already preparing to divorce Duanmu, Quebec. She's free now. Also, I don't want to hide it from you. I'm going to pursue Cold Glaze. I want to marry her." Han Hao, who had always been gentle, acted as if he had lost his mind. His tone was firm and resolute. "You're hopeless. Have you considered our family before doing this? What if the Kurosawa really comes looking for trouble with our family? How do you want me to protect this family? How can I protect you?" Han Hao's father's words made sense. According to Duanmu K's personality, he definitely wouldn't let his family off if I stayed here. I could faintly hear Han Hao sigh. He continued, "Dad, no matter what you say, I'll stick to my principles. I must be with Cold Glaze. No matter who opposes me, I'll persist. Dad, don't say anything. Don't worry, I won't let you and Mom be in danger. In 2 days I'll move out with cold glaze. What? You want to move out? Do you think moving out will solve everything? Duanmu-ke won't chase you to the ends of the earth. Son, don't be so naive. Chapter 108. Hearing Han Hao's father say that, I didn't want to be a burden to others. I opened the door and was about to go out when I heard Han Hao say to his father, Dad, I've never begged you before. I beg you to believe your son this once. I will never do anything to hurt you and Mom. Please, Dad. After a long time, Han Hao's father didn't say anything. After a while, Han Hao's father finally opened his mouth and said to Han Hao, All right. I only have one son, so I can only listen to you. All right, since you're so confident, then we'll do as you wish. Really? That's great. Thank you, Dad. Then I'll go upstairs first. Hearing him say that, I quickly returned to the room, closed the door, and sat down on the chair. Not long after, the door was pushed open and Han Hao walked in. He looked at me and said excitedly, Shaoli, I have good news to tell you. My father has agreed to let me pursue you. That's great. Seeing Han Hao's happy expression, I couldn't feel happy at all. Han Hao looked at me and suddenly realized that he hadn't considered my feelings. He put his hands on the armrests of the sofa, and his face was very close to mine. He looked at me and said, I'm sorry, Shaoli. I didn't consider your feelings. Sorry. Don't be sad. He reached out and gently touched my face. Feeling the warmth of his palm, I closed my eyes and tears flowed down again. Seeing this, Han Hao hugged me in his arms and gently kissed my forehead. He stroked my hair and said softly, Don't cry. I'm here. Don't worry and stay here for 2 days. I'll accompany you well. Han Hao held my face and looked at me with his gentle eyes. All right. Don't you like roses? My garden is a little small, so I made a small rose pond for you. You can go and see it. I don't know what color roses you like, so I planted some of each color. I don't know if you like them or not. Hearing Han Hao say that, my tears flowed down again. He gently wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes, and his expression was very gentle. It made me regret not choosing such a man in the first place. I looked at Han Hao and said, Han Hao, why are you so good to me? Han Hao held my face and gently kissed my lips. He looked at me and said, Shaoli, I really like you. I don't know why, but when I don't see you, I always think about you. Sometimes I find it ridiculous. When I think about you and Duanmu-ke having to spend the rest of your life together, my heart aches. But when I heard that Duanmu-ke wanted to divorce you that day, I suddenly felt that my chance had come. I swore that I would get you, that I would give you happiness, and that you wouldn't be wronged anymore. These are my true thoughts, so I have to be good to you. Maybe my family isn't as rich and powerful as the Duanmu family, and I'm not as perfect as Duanmu-ke, but my feelings for you won't be any less than his feelings for you, or even more than his. Hearing Han Hao say that, I reached out and hugged Han Hao. At that moment, the warmth of Han Hao's embrace made me feel very safe. Han Hao hugged me tightly. He stroked my hair and said, Shaoli, don't be afraid. In the future I will be with you every day. Don't worry, I won't let you leave me again. This time I will hold you tightly in my arms. I nodded vigorously and snuggled into Han Hao's embrace. Actually, I was conflicted. I couldn't give up my feelings for Duanmu-ke, but I couldn't resist Han Hao's pursuit of me. I didn't know if what I was doing was right or wrong. Forget it, let nature take its course. This moment my phone rang. I took it out and saw that it was Xinyao. Picked up the phone. Hello, Xinyao. Sister-in-law, are you okay? Have you arrived at Han Hao Gija's home? Xinyao asked worriedly. Then I've arrived. Don't worry, everything is fine on my side. How are you? Did Dad and Mom make things difficult for you? Did Duanmu-ke hurt you? I was very worried about Xinyao's situation. Don't worry, sister-in-law. Everything is fine on my side. Gij was very irritable at first, but I subdued him later. I also talked to Dad and Mom, saying that you're going to Han Hao Gij's home to play for 2 days. They won't think too much about it. Suri also went back to the Ling family. I just talked to him on the phone and he's fine on his side. Xin Yao reported the situation to me. That's good. It's good that you're fine. My heart was finally relieved. But sister-in-law, there's something I'm sorry about. Xin Yao lowered her voice and said to me. What is it? That. Xin Yao's words were obviously hesitant. The rattan chair by the rose pond, I couldn't keep it. Gij still tore it down. I held the phone in my hand and lowered my head. Seeing this, Han Hao hugged me. I knew he was comforting me. Hearing that I didn't answer, Xin Yao continued. I later found out that it was Yuexin who instigated Gij to tear it down. Actually, now that I think about it, Gij didn't like to stroll around the garden. Otherwise, how would he know what was there in the past and what is there now? It's obvious that someone told on Yuexin, so Gij did it. I sighed and said softly, forget it. It's all in the past. If you want to tear it down, then so be it. It doesn't belong to me anymore. Sister-in-law, don't think about it. Have a good rest and have fun for 2 days. When you want to come back, you can come back. Don't worry, I'll take care of Gij. Then Xin Yao hung up the phone. After I hung up, I sat there with a serious expression. Han Hao looked at me. It seemed he'd heard what we were talking about. I raised my head and looked at him. Han Hao, I'm a little tired. I want to lie down for a while. Okay. Han Hao helped me stand up. He lifted the blanket, and I took off my shoes and lay on the bed. He gently covered me with the blanket and then sat on the chair next to the bed. He stared at me and stroked my hair from time to time. I looked at Han Hao and said softly, why don't you go back and rest for a while? You've been busy all morning. Han Hao shook his head and looked at me. It's okay. You go to sleep. I just want to look at you like this. I looked into Han Hao's eyes. His eyes were always so clear and gentle. I held Han Hao's hand and said, then it's settled. Don't go. Stay here. If I don't see you when I wake up, I might be scared. Chapter 109. Han Hao held my hand and sat quietly next to me, gently patting my back. Gradually I felt sleepy, closed my eyes and fell asleep. I didn't know how long I slept, but when I woke up, Han Hao was lying on the edge of the bed, also asleep. Looking at Han Hao's sleeping appearance, I suddenly felt very happy. I gently touched Han Hao's handsome face. His sleeping appearance was just as beautiful as usual. Unknowingly, I gradually fell into a trance. After a while, Han Hao's body moved and he woke up. Looking into his hazy eyes, I actually blushed a little. I turned my head, not daring to look at Han Hao directly. Han Hao gently stroked my hair and asked, how did you sleep? Did you feel better? I nodded and answered, much better. It's okay, don't worry. Han Hao raised his hand to look at his watch. It's almost time for lunch. The housekeeper should have made a lot of delicious food. Do you want to go down and eat together? If it's not convenient for you, I'll bring some for you to eat, okay? I shook my head and looked at Han Hao. No, I don't really want to eat, so don't bother. Then you should at least eat a little. Otherwise, I'll be heartbroken. You can't bear to see me heartbroken, right? Han Hao leaned over and gently kissed my forehead. He raised his head and looked at me. Stroking my face, he said, what should I do? Just like you. Even if it's just looking at you, I feel very happy. Hearing Han Hao's words, my face instantly turned red. My eyes drifted a little. I looked at him and said softly, Han Hao, didn't you tell me that you have a pool of roses at home? Can I go take a look? Was that true? But my rose pool isn't that big. You won't like it, right? No, you can go down later. I'll go take a look first. Recently I've been too busy. I haven't had time to take care of the flower pond. Wait for me. Han Hao finished speaking and was about to get up. I grabbed his hand. Han Hao turned to look at me. I looked at him and said, "Let's go together." "I don't mind." He hesitated but still helped me up from the bed. The two of us walked out of the bedroom one after the other and headed downstairs. As soon as we reached the living room, we saw Han Hao's father walking out of the study room. It seemed he was going to the dining room to eat. When he saw me, his eyes stopped on my face. I hurried forward and stood in front of him. "Hello, Uncle Honshu. I'm sorry to disturb you." "Don't worry, Shaoli. I didn't think you'd grow so big. It's been a long time since I've seen you." Han Hao's father's gaze softened. "Yes, I've heard my father talk about you, but I don't have much of an impression of you. That's for sure. When I went to your house as a guest, you were only a child of 2 or 3 years old. But since then, Howard especially liked to play with you. It turns out that he had already begun to like you since then." Hearing his father say that, my face instantly turned red. I lowered my head, feeling very embarrassed. Han Hao seemed to notice my embarrassment. He pulled me to look at his father and said, "Dad, you're talking nonsense again. You're going to eat, right? Hurry up. I'll take Shaoli for a walk in the garden." I knew he was trying to change the subject. Han Hao's father looked at Han Hao, then at me. "Shaoli, your father and I have known each other for a long time. We've been good friends for many years, so we're not strangers. I'll be frank with you. I think you know the consequences of leaving the Duanmu house without permission. If the Duanmu K can't hold back, he may push Hao Er and I into a dead end. I don't think that's what you want." I nodded and said, "Uncle Honshu, I understand what you mean." He patted my shoulder and said, "Of course, I'm not forcing you to go back. Duanmu Lixiong just called me and he already knows that you're here. He also agreed to let you stay here for 2 days. Of course, after 2 days you have to leave. Otherwise, I don't know what Duanmu K will do to Hao Er. I don't care anymore. Hao Er's mother and I have already decided to go abroad to enjoy life. But Hao Er is different. He's at the peak of his career. If you have him in your heart, how can you bear to let him be surrounded by enemies?" Why are you saying all this?" Han Hao was a little agitated. I forcefully pulled his arm, indicating that he shouldn't say anything. I raised my head and looked at Han Hao's father. "Uncle, I understand what you mean. Don't worry, I won't let the Duanmu K have the chance to ruin your happiness. I'll go back to the Duanmu's house in the morning the day after tomorrow." "Thank you, Shaoli." Han Hao's father nodded to me and entered the dining room. Han Hao pulled my arm and walked towards the garden. As soon as we walked out of the front door of the house, he stood in front of me and looked at me. "Shaoli, why did you agree to my father's request? Why do you have to go back? Don't you know that home is dangerous for you?" I smiled at Han Hao and said, "You're overthinking it. How could there be any danger? It's already been so long. I'm guessing that his anger towards me has pretty much dissipated. When I get back, his attitude towards me might even change." "Do you believe what you just said?" Han Hao asked me. "Or do you still have feelings for him and can't let him go?" I suddenly froze. That's right, even I couldn't believe what I had just said. I calmed myself down, looked at Han Hao and said, "I know this is impossible. But other than using this method to numb myself, what else can I do? He clearly doesn't have feelings for me anymore, but my heart still feels like it's waiting for something." Han Hao reached out and pulled me into his arms. "Okay, don't think about it. I won't force you to do anything you don't want to do. I just want you to be well and slowly accept me. Then I will be satisfied." Listening to Han Hao's heartbeat, my heart felt more and more at ease. I nestled in Han Hao's arms. I suddenly wanted to give myself to him completely. Maybe he really was a man worth entrusting my life to. I hugged Han Hao tightly. Han Hao was shocked by my initiative. He hugged me and whispered in my ear, "Shaoli, why are you so proactive today? You make me scared." Scared of what?" I lay on his chest and felt his excited heartbeat. Han Hao hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm scared that you'll leave me. I'm scared that I won't be able to hold you tightly in my arms like this anymore. Chapter 110. No, but please give me some time. Let me try to accept you. I leaned into Han Hao's embrace. Although my face was red, I couldn't help but speak my mind. Han Hao hugged me tightly and gently stroked my hair. Thank you, Xiaoli. Thank you for accepting me. I raised my head and looked into Han Hao's eyes. I smiled and said, Didn't you say there was a rose pond? Where is it? Take me there. Han Hao pulled me deeper into the garden. Suddenly, he went behind me and covered my eyes. I was very surprised. What are you doing? He asked. Shoo, don't talk. I'll take you there and give you a surprise. Han Hao covered my eyes and gently leaned against my back. He was afraid that I would fall. After walking for a while, Han Hao suddenly stopped. He covered my eyes again and said, All right, we're here. But I'm a little nervous. Nervous about what? I asked, puzzled. Han Hao sighed and said softly, I'm afraid you won't like it. I chuckled and said, I haven't seen it yet. How do you know I won't like it? Hurry up and let me see it. Han Hao hesitated for a moment, then softly said to me, Okay. Han Hao slowly removed his hands from my eyes. I opened my eyes and saw a beautiful rose pond in front of me. Although the pond wasn't big, the flowers were blooming beautifully. They had been manicured into a heart shape. From the inside to the outside, each circle had a different color. It was very beautiful. Han Hao stood behind me and looked at my shocked face. He reached out and hugged me tightly. He whispered in my ear, Is it very small? You don't really like it, do you? I shook my head and said to Han Hao, No, I like it very much. I like it very much. Han Hao kissed my cheek and said, It's good that you like it. My efforts weren't in vain. I turned around and looked at Han Hao. Did you do all of this? I asked softly. Han Hao nodded and said to me, Because one time I went to the Duanmu family's house, I heard you mention the rose pond, and I knew the origin of the rose pond. I knew you longed for that kind of beautiful love, so after talking to Dad, I built a similar rose pond in our family's garden. Because I didn't trust anyone else to do it, I arranged for workers to build the pond, and then I personally went to the flower market to pick out a batch of the best rose sprouts and planted them in the pond according to my own ideas. I thought I would make a mess of it, but looking at it now, it's not bad. At least the shape is there, ha. Han Hao rubbed his head and stood in front of me with a silly smile. I didn't know why, but tears fell from the corners of my eyes. Looking at Han Hao's silly smile, I suddenly felt very happy. When Han Hao saw me cry, he frowned and reached out to wipe the tears from the corners of my eyes. Then he looked at me and said, Xiaoli, what's wrong? Did I do something to upset you again? Don't cry. Seeing you cry really hurts my heart. I reached out and hugged Han Hao tightly. I lay in his arms and cried very sadly. Han Hao didn't say anything. He just held me in his arms and softly said, Xiaoli, it's okay. Don't cry. You still have me. Xiaoli, don't be afraid. I'll always be by your side. Han Hao, thank you. I don't know how to express my feelings, but I'm willing to accept you. I'm willing to be with you. Even if it's just as a friend, I'm willing. My tears soaked Han Hao's shirt. Han Hao hugged me tightly and softly said, That's enough. That's enough. Xiaoli, as long as you're willing, I won't marry anyone else. I won't let you suffer for others. Don't worry, I'll definitely be with you. Just then I suddenly thought of something. I pushed Han Hao away and stood in front of him, keeping a certain distance from him. I looked at Han Hao and said, But there's something I want to tell you. I don't want to hide anything from you. Of course you can choose not to be with me because of this. I won't. There's nothing that can stop me from marrying you. You're more important to me than anything else. I'm pregnant. I lowered my head, not daring to look at Han Hao. What did you say? Han Hao looked at me with a puzzled expression. I'm pregnant. My tears couldn't stop flowing. I lowered my head and said, "It's Xiao Kei's." Han Hao didn't say anything. He stood in front of me, still looking at me with a surprised expression. I understood that he couldn't accept this fact. This was within my expectations. Although I wasn't surprised, my heart still hurt. No matter what, I didn't want to hide anything from him. After a while, Han Hao walked in front of me. He held my face and looked into my eyes. He said softly, "It's not your fault. I guess Xiao Kei doesn't know either. No matter what, as long as it's your decision, I'll believe it's the right one. Even if you want me to die for you, I'll do it without hesitation." I reached out to touch his face and looked at him. "Silly, what are you talking about? How could I do that to you? I just think it's unfair to you. After all, this child isn't yours. Even if you're willing to accept it, will your parents accept it? This is my business. You don't have to worry about it. Take care of your body and give birth to the child. I'll take care of you and the child." Han Hao stroked my hair and comforted me softly. I leaned against Han Hao's chest and nodded. This long-awaited feeling of peace made me feel comfortable and at ease. It was as if I had found a harbor to dock at. Han Hao and I strolled around the garden for a while before we returned to our room. He was worried that I would be tired, so he insisted that I should sleep. I couldn't persuade him otherwise, so I had to compromise. He made me lie down on the bed and covered me with the blanket. Then he sat down next to me and looked at me quietly. I held Han Hao's hand and looked at him. "Are you tired?" Han Hao looked at me. "Yes, but when I see you I don't feel tired anymore." My face was a little hot. I moved to the center of the bed and patted the spot next to me. I looked at Han Hao shyly and said, "Why don't you come up and lie down for a while? It's better than sitting down and resting." Han Hao looked at me with an expression of disbelief and asked, "Huh? Is that really appropriate?" I pursed my lips and rolled my eyes at Han Hao. "If you don't want to, then forget it. I'm going to sleep. Don't disturb me. Good afternoon." Then I turned my back to him and closed my eyes. You're tuning in to the Whispers of Romance YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.